pode ser o próprio corpo, ou a companhia de dança do Pantanal. O Museu de Arte Moderna de São Paulo permite cores. A única de Minas, onde tem os projetos que todo mundo já conhece, até aqueles projetos que todo mundo precisa conhecer. A dessa cultura que crescemos e evoluímos juntos.
Com apoio do Instituto Cultural Vale, a arte popular é destaque no Maranhão.
E o nosso papel é fazer com que elas sejam conhecidas, valorizadas.
Vale, transformar a mineração hoje é transformar o amanhã de todos.
A cidade mais nacional do Brasil. É por isso que as Olimpíadas foram no Rio e a final do Mundial também. O Maracanã é nacional, a Sapucaí é nacional, o Rock in Rio é no Rio, mas é nacional. A TV Globo nasceu no Rio, mas virou nacional. É natural que o jornal O Globo seja um jornal nacional, porque ele é a cara de um país, cuja cara é a do Cristo nacional.
Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, testing, testing. Okay.
De uma dona de casa, criado no bairro da Ilha das Cobras, que é um dos bairros de vulnerabilidade social bem grande, né? E durante muito tempo a gente percebe o quanto determinadas ações são importantes ser feitas nessas comunidades, justamente para você dar oportunidade. Eu costumo dizer sempre que a vida é feita de ofertas e oportunidades. E no início da minha adolescência, aos 10 anos de idade, quando começa também muito um trabalho Sou nascido em Paraty, né, filho de um pescador, de uma dona de casa, criado no bairro da Ilha das Cobras, que é um dos bairros de vulnerabilidade social bem grande, né, e durante muito tempo a gente percebe o quanto determinadas ações são importantes ser feitas nessas comunidades, justamente para você dar oportunidade. Eu costumo dizer sempre que que a vida é feita de ofertas e oportunidades. E no início da minha adolescência, aos 10 anos de idade, quando começa também muito um trabalho que estava acontecendo no Estado relacionados aos UPPs, né? Foi um momento que Paraty foi muito impactado diretamente com a questão da violência, né? Da entrada do tráfico diretamente. E nesse mesmo período é o período que eu passo 2 anos fora, dos meus 11 ao do meu finalzinho de 12 anos. Eu fui morar no Rio por uma questão de trabalho do meu pai e foi uma grande virada de chave ali, porque quando eu volto para Paraty, com 12 anos, eu me deparo com muitos dos meus amigos envolvidos com as coisas erradas da vida, né? Envolvidos com tráfico, seja já atuando diretamente com isso ou como usuários no início. E muito pela falta de oportunidades e de ofertas, né? Então eu sempre estava envolvido com grêmio estudantil, com atividades que aconteciam pela cidade. E aí ingressei no curso normal logo na sequência. E o curso normal ele oferta muitas atividades para você participar, muitas das vezes até no início por uma questão de carga horária de estágio, mas que depois acaba despertando o interesse realmente para quem gosta do setor, né? E a Flip ela surge nesse momento. Realmente, Paraty tem um momento antes e depois da Flip. Não digo nem depois, porque nós, se Deus quiser, estaremos como durante muitos e muitos anos. Ainda estou na metade do meu caminhar, mas esses últimos 20 anos foram dedicados totais à cultura da nossa cidade, graças a ofertas e oportunidades que eu tive ainda no meu momento de curso normal e tudo isso porque a Flip naquele momento pôde oportunizar tudo isso para mim e para muitos outros jovens que despertaram e abriram as suas mentes para outras oportunidades.
Flip 20 anos. Vidas que transformam lugares, que transformam pessoas. Escreva conosco essa história. Faça parte da rede amiga da Flip para continuarmos transformando juntos os próximos 20 anos. Acesse flip.org.br e faça sua doação. Ministério do Turismo, Instituto Cultural Vale e Associação Casa Azul apresentam 20ª Flip Festa Literária Internacional de Paraty. O projeto conta com benefício da Lei Federal de Incentivo à Cultura. Vale Mais Cultura. Tem patrocínio oficial do Instituto Cultural Vale. Patrocínio Itaú. Copatrocínio O Globo. Apoio Esquilo, Mac Móveis, Prefeitura de Paraty, Globo Livros, Unigel, CQSFV Advogados e Oceana. Concepção Associação Casa Azul. E realização Secretaria Especial da Cultura, Ministério do Turismo, Pátria Amada Brasil, Governo Federal.
Hello. Good evening. My name is Mauro Munhoz. I'm the Artistic Director of Flip. It's a huge pleasure to be here this evening and to welcome you one and all to the 20th edition of Flip. It's a huge thrill, and it's a symbolic date for us. 20 years gives us a measure of time. At the turn of the century, in the year 2000, when Flip was first conceived and began to take shape, there had been 10 years that had been gestating. Paraty, this town, which had so many unique qualities, both material and immaterial, so strong in its past, it required that we take a close look at the longer time horizon. And 20 years was something that appeared very strikingly. We thought about looking towards the future, looking 20 years ahead. And it was a huge challenge for us. We talked with people thinking of this 20-year time horizon. And it's still very difficult for us. It's important for us to be fully aware that what we do today is going to have an impact tomorrow, and it's going to have impacts in the future. It's very difficult to perceive this. People who work with culture and education know that instinctively, intrinsically. The acts that you make today are going to have consequences in the long term, and they're going to have an impact on the future generations. It was through a reading, an in-depth reading that was performed in a shared way with numerous people involved, close reading, an in-depth reading to understand what this place is and what it means. Based on this in-depth reading, there emerged the idea of Flip, and even more, the shape and form, the art of making Flip happen. A way how to catalyze manifestation could bring to the residents and visitors to Paraty the experience of reading in the most comprehensive sense of the word. In 2004, in this very stage here, Maria Valéria Rezende, an author who came to Flip, she said something which I repeat oftentimes, and it's worthwhile to quote again and again. We don't learn to see only to read the letters and the words. And she said this on the stage. It's not just reading the letters and the words. That's not all there is to reading. We learn to read to interpret the world, to read the world. And this reading of the world is only possible when we read and interpret others, when we do this movement, which is the only way for us to read and interpret ourselves. I believe that there's a lot of Flip in that comment by Maria Valéria Rezende. And to read the world is to read the territory, to read the town, the city where we live. The only way for us to read the town where we live is to care for the town, for it to be a place that's fruitful for encounters. This may be one of the secrets of Flip, but it is to transform the town, activated by Flip and mobilized by it to happen what is happening right here and now. In 2009, 13 years ago, Davi Uguchi, a literary critic, he quoted Borges, and he said that we should have more pride of the books that we read than of the books that we write. Flip is all about reading. In this sense, in the broader sense and comprehensive sense of reading. And these readings revealed the symbolic power that exists in Paraty in its traditional festivals, which are still so alive, and the capacity of local culture, the people of Paraty, to incorporate into their living experience, their lived experience, manifestations of this kind, something that we always call attention to is how Parachi in the 1960s created an amalgam of culture, people who lived here, very isolated still at that time, and the artists and intellectuals and the writers, photographers, people, theater people who came to Parachi at a time which we needed to lay back and find our roots, and how nothing more natural for this manifestation around the experience of reading than a literary festival. At this time, we were living with Liz and Louis, Liz Calder and Louis Baum. Liz Calder, the president of Flip. I was building a home for her here in Parachi, and all of these things were combined, came together, and made this project possible. During the 5 days of the festival, the experience of contact, conversation, and the wall-less encounters in the open houses of Parachi in the partner spaces, these all transform the towns. New town squares emerge where during time outside of these 5 days, so just parking lots take place. Like here where we are today. This is normally the parking lot over the rest of the year. And these places, they convene people from widely diverse origins, flips in its activities of permanence in the territory, as we saw in this video here, where José Sérgio, our cultural secretary of Parachi, is a good example of how these cultural manifestations make the town more permeable to exchanges and create new opportunities. Today we're here 20 years after the first edition of Flip, launching the first roundtable, which is going to pay tribute to Maria Firmina Reis, who was born 200 years ago. People who hear the roundtable today and tomorrow will discover that she lied about her age. And since as a woman she lied, that said that she was older to be able to teach school. So she said that she was 3 years older than she actually was. She set up the first primary school in Guimarães in the province of Maranhão in the 19th century. A primary school with boys and girls, co-ed, and a free school open to everyone, all the children. She brought Maria Firmina Reis, she created a space for dissonance, and in a sense, she pre-shaped the marvelous work that Anísio Teixeira and Paulo Freire developed later in the 20th century. It's a huge joy to pay tribute to Maria Firmina Reis. And this year, we also have outstanding artist Cláudia Andujar, who through photography, she launched her gaze, a sensitive view, that we could say even literary gaze towards the Yanomami indigenous people of Brazil. So I wish to thank you all the guest authors and chairs for their presence and participation. I want to thank people for their involvement and engagement by the Flip team. I want to especially thank Liz Calder and Louis Baum for having been these people who, with this spirit and energy, brought incredible inspiration for all of us. I also want to thank the residents of Parachi, the true hosts of this party, this festival. I want to thank the Vale Culture Institute, our official sponsor, Itaú, for their sponsorship as well, the O Globo newspaper for co-sponsorship, and all of the patrons, partners, and supporters of Flip. Special warm thanks to you all, the audience, who always show this great enthusiasm for our festival. And I want to especially thank the curators of this edition, Fernanda Bastos, Milena Brito, and Pedro Meira Monteiro, whom I invite onto this stage. They must be coming shortly, hopefully. And thus, I turn the floor over to Fernanda Bastos, and I wish you all that these 5 days of this festival, may they bring us transforming experiences, a great festival for one and all. Good evening. So it's a huge pleasure to see this space packed to the gills to pay tribute to this author, Maria Firmina Reis, our special tributee, and it's a privilege because of her literary production and her activism for education and for her sensibility leading us to set up the program. And without further ado, I'll turn the floor over to Milena Brito. So thank you very much. Good evening. Now I want to thank you all because you are witnesses to what is going to happen today, and because they lead us to think that when we were testing Flip with this and experiencing Flip with this strong and lasting experience, we think with great emotion that literature and experiences that are shared here are capable of making things happen in people. And as chairs and curators, as readers, today we offer a little bit of the work that's also work that transforms, and as we do it and as we offer it to you to share with you, and as we listen to the things that are going to be happening here over the course of these next 5 days. So thank you very much as well. Good evening, people. Welcome, one and all, and it's a huge pleasure and honor to be working with Fernanda and with Milena and with the Flip team. We're truly happy to be able to propose this festival here. It's also a time of re-encounters for Parachis, teaching us to breathe again, and perhaps Brazil is suggesting that we now breathe again, and so this is a great festival and it's a party. As the audience applauds wildly, this is a great festival of the words that have been mistreated for so many years, and the words are here to be loved again, loved and cherished. For us to celebrate the legacy of Maria Firmina Reis, I want to call forward to the stage our chair, who is from a cultural analyst who works works in the Metropolis in the cultural TV, Adriana Couto, and also the guest who's going to be participating in this roundtable, Flávia Magalhães Pinto and Fernanda Miranda. And to begin this conversation, this encounter, the slammer, poet, and social scientist, Midria. Please come forward. Oh, Firmina, bless the steps, bless the songs of those who will come. Oh, Firmina, bless the pen that the ink writes, and with fascination. I wish to ask permission to read Maria Firmina Reis. Here my soul expands with love, and my chest expands. And here on a rock, the sea side, and on the white sand, very tenderly, the wave dies out. Beyond, on the blue line of the horizons, the waters run again to the horizon. Such sweet poetry inspires me. The charming enchantment of these naked beaches, this breeze that caresses my hair, sewing with accent these your phrases and fees here, your chest, the pains less striking that strikes my was sobbing, and here my lyre, the psalm melodious sings with my chest, with what a beautiful iris my desire covers. Come to enjoy this deliciousness, this love that inspires poetry. Come taste the tenderness of your soul to the sound of this poetic harmony. You'll feel the noise of these waters, the sweet sigh of the breakers, the grateful love sworn here on the riverbanks, on the banks of the sea. Come to enjoy this moment. So much poetry, inspired by poetry. Come to taste my simple love to the sound of the waves at dusk. Oh, Firmina, bless the steps, bless the steps, bless the canticles of those who will come. The voice of Maria Firmina echoing in Brazilian literature. Maria Firmina, she was a pioneering woman. She was a pioneering woman, way ahead of her time. And it's a pleasure to launch Flip, asking permission of Maria Firmina, of all the people that came before us, because it's a struggle of many generations. I'm very happy and moved to be here. And I'm holding back my emotion at the beginning of the roundtable because it's important for us to celebrate the first Brazilian woman novelist, the first Brazilian woman novelist, Maria Firmina dos Reis. Here today, we're going to have two women, two researchers who understand, based on their own experiences and also based on their research, this legacy and the importance of Maria Firmina. It's what we're going to do today here, celebrating the legacy of Maria Firmina and showing her importance for Brazilian literature. I want all of you to receive and have a round of applause for two researchers who are going to be talking to us. Fernanda Miranda, who is a professor and researchers with writing about black women writers and editor of Firmina's, the journal. Thank you very much for joining. Good evening. And Ana Flávia Magalhães Pinto, who is a professor at the Department of History at the University of Brasilia, a historian who is delving and has been for a long time very deeply into this issue of black intellectuals in the 18th and 19th century, our press, the black press in Brazil. It's going to be so important. I know that you also like to say that you are a member of the networks of black historians, which is important for you that we're here together. That's why we're here together. So thank you very much, Ana Flávia Magalhães Pinto, together with Fernanda Miranda. Fine. Maria Firmina, who was born in the state of Maranhão in 1822, but she was actually born at the time still before abolition. It had not been decreed emancipation. She's a black woman who had a voice, who wrote the first Brazilian novel by a woman author. She was a professor, a teacher, a woman who launched and inaugurated an important narrative. I would like for us to begin talking about that. Could we say that the dream of Firmina and her literature and this path that she trod, it's a dream for freedom? What do you think about that? Was that her dream? Fernanda Miranda, good evening. Don't pay attention to the fact that I'm trembling here. I want to thank you all for celebrating with us this great woman, this great creator of meanings for us to this day, Maria Firmina dos Reis. I would say that Firmina created our first text for freedom, and not only our first text, talking here as a Brazilian woman, but talking about Portuguese, the Portuguese language, as a black woman. Maria Firmina dos Reis has the fiber, a pioneering fiber of this idea of freedom which involves a free African, especially discourse which is not concerned about making any kind of concessions with this logic of silencing history, as in Brazil, and a discourse which raises us all up as Brazilians and leads us to revisit our history, to revisit the meaning of our place in this territory. Maria Firmina dos Reis created the texture, the woof, the fabric for freedom, which was not born here. We had to reclaim it based on our memory and to find it in Africa, the Africa of our ancestors. It was Firmina who was telling us this for the first time. And to this day, we're reaping the meanings of this grammar, this inaugural grammar by Maria Firmina dos Reis, which embraces us with our issues. To this day, Firmina is not just a pioneer of novels and writing, of the text, of word freedom, of the idea of what it means to be free, even though it is in a territory that is totally structured by colonialism, as in the case of Brazil. So to celebrate Maria Firmina dos Reis today is to celebrate as well the possibility of being free, to create, to invent, to produce freedom. Albeit when everything says no, Firmina says yes. We're feeding this yes to this day, of course. Anna, what situations, what context, Firmina, which ones did you have to confront to be able to circulate, to write in the press, to be a teacher, to write novels, to write poetry, to write music as a black woman in the 19th century? Good evening, one and all. One and all. I like to call attention to the fact that from a logic of a spiral time, Maria Firmina is present here amongst us as a beacon lighting experiences of black freedom. I think it's important to emphasize, because the key to the answer to the question is how she made herself believing in her talents and virtues, believing in her legitimacy to occupy spaces which she had dreamed so long, and considered thus as others authors of her days. How are we able to acknowledge for Maria Firmina dos Reis and other black people, free people, and active in the world of letters in the 19th century, step on the historical ground that we acknowledge today? It's unnecessary to understand that we suffer low expectations concerning black people in Brazil. Low expectations which reduce everyone the black experience of slavery and underestimates the humanity of these people. Maria Firmina was someone who elaborated in her trajectory, in her career, the feasibility of black existence. And this means that she is feasible based on links not only with white male figures, but also with other black men, other black women, and black and white women. We have a challenge in the coming years to invest not only in this narrative of inserting Maria Firmina dos Reis in the mostly white canon, but to perceive her as someone who established a network of solidarity and wove this network of solidarity, which consisted of subjects who we don't even know ourselves. Who are the women, the black women, who built in the 19th century, in the early 20th century, with Maria Firmina dos Reis? This question, it's the most important question, even more important than to say, okay, a story of absolute. She overcame all odds, against all odds. It's important for us to make peace with our own past, precisely to realize that if today we are a country that is mostly black, it's the result of individual and collective efforts, which these explain how Maria Firmina dos Reis made herself a teacher, a writer, an abolitionist, a poet, and a number of other dimensions of human life, which oftentimes escape through our fingers, which we think they're exceptional, that they appear to not fit with the scenario. Okay, great. Okay, Ursula, the novel, the first novel, the inaugural novel from 1859, Ursula, and it's a novel with Ursula is the heroine. She's a heroine, a white heroine, a white woman, the villain of this story, and stating simply, the villain is a slaveholder who wants to marry Ursula, who is this damsel who is caring for her ill mother. At the same time, we have another narrative which plays out in Ursula, which is the story of a black woman, enslaved woman, two enslaved black men, in addition to the girl who is saved by Tulu, who's this black man, just to tell everybody about the story. But now, that was a thumbnail sketch of the book, a black woman writer who presents this novel to us. She uses this narrative for what? For whom? Who's going to read Ursula? Who's reading this novel? If we have widespread illiteracy in 19th century Brazil, if there are black women who are not going to school, and even women, neither white nor black women were in school mostly. So who is she writing this book for? Is it for us now? For the future? For the white society? To try in some way to change things? For whom did Firmina write? I think that Firmina is deeply linked to her historical time as an author. So she is engaging in dialogue with the obstacles of that moment, and she is struggling against the obstacles of that time. So on the one hand, she was writing for the lettered Brazilian society. At the end of the day, we know that our country, Brazil, is also a country which has a long history of struggle for access to the right to read, the right to education, the right to write, the right to mean something and make meaning of something. And Maria Firmina Reis was fighting against her own historical present because she was challenging an entire landscape and scenario which told her that black people were not even people, considered people. So Firmina was writing indeed for that lettered Brazilian society, and she needed to hear Susanna, black Susanna, that experience of the black slave woman, but she was also writing for the future, which is our time, today, now. That's why we welcome her, and she welcomes us. She embraces us. Firmina talks a lot about our own present, about this time where we still say that black lives matter. We still have to say that. We're still struggling for the right to be, to exist. Firmina created the black people as subjects, protagonists, the first times as protagonists in the Portuguese language. This creates a future for this writing. This black writing today, which exists with full freedom of expression. So I believe that Maria Firmina Reis has this double movement. On the one hand, she engages in dialogue head-on, very proudly, with head on high, with her own time, the time that she lived in. And she was struggling with the weapons she had at her hand. On the other hand, Firmina also speaks to the future. She projects a possibility. She creates a tradition. She creates a narrative for a past that was asking and begging for a possible narrative. And it's this past and it's this narrative that she calls Susanna, black Susanna, through this voice, Susanna's voice, that time, historical time, which was purposely, intentionally swept under the rug, re-emerged for the readers. So Maria Firmina says at some state in the novel, now you will hear. And that's where she narrates, yes, without any pauses, and the reader needs to read that with no pauses. Nevertheless, when today, in 2022, when we read Firmina, what are the meanings that they suggest for us as a society, for our society, for our idea of equality, for our idea of the future? Firmina has a lot for us to tell us about our own time. She's not a dated author. This is a great merit of this writer. She remains alive because what she created as a text, what it still means for us. I'll turn the floor over to you, and you're talking here, and I was thinking to myself and thinking as you spoke, Fernanda, Ursula launched and inaugurated in Brazilian literature this narrative of Susanna, who's a black woman, Black Susanna, the black mother, and she tells her life before she was enslaved. This didn't exist in Brazilian literature before. She told about her life in Africa. She tells how she came to Brazil. She tells about the sorrows and suffering in her own voice in the slave ship. And this makes all the difference. It's important for us to realize that Maria Firmina dos Reis is able to elaborate Susanna, the character, not based on an accumulation of Brazilian literature, the canonic literature in Brazil, but there is a production of memory and narratives, oftentimes oral memory, which she was used to hearing, and she grasped to produce a character, and not just Susanna. Fernanda, also the black characters in Ursula, the novel, have density. They're dense because they bear what had been claimed even before. But this is given by black people, African people, who claim that they take a position and occupy a place as protagonists, complete subjects. This condition as complete subjects and protagonists is something that's important for us to reclaim at this time where we're celebrating Maria Firmina dos Reis, precisely because she did not begin as a writer. There's a tradition of subjects, complete subjects, men and women, black men and women who claim this place and who encourage constructions over time. What Maria Firmina dos Reis did over the course of in her writing at some stages is this giving proof to this. And it's important to state, Didi, that if there was illiteracy, chronic illiteracy, and ingrained illiteracy in 19th century Brazil, which pretended that only on average 20%, 25% of the people, Brazilian people, could read and write. It's important to recall that amongst these 30%, there were black people, although they were not conserved. This percentage, Maria Firmina did not produce literature only in the so-called white world. She was in a country, it was mostly black, where other subjects also projected these dreams of writing. It's also important to recall that literature in Brazil in the 19th century was performed more to be read out loud, and the audience listened, and therefore we can expand and amplify the reach of the public, of her audience, Maria Firmina dos Reis, because her writings were read out loud. Even more so, she is a teacher. These stories that she wrote, of course, they could have very well have reached her students, her pupils, who took them home to their families, and so on and so forth. So I think that we need to have sincere exercises of historical imagination, which break with our repertoire, impoverished repertoire, because of the racism and sexism which circumscribe black women and men in Brazil to something exotic or alien or unfeasible, as highlighted by the researcher Mario Augusto Medeiros, we need to overcome this feeling of the discovery of the unusual every time we find these manifestations, because we know quite well that a literary work, is the result of an authorship, but also an audience that it is addressed to. And nobody writes only for themselves. And when one writes for their time, Maria Firmina Reis, she was also interested in leaving marks and the path and making sense for the future. And it's very well for us to be doing this exactly now. Okay, of course. Maria Firmina, she wrote a preface for Ursula where she helps us to understand her objectives. And she highlights this quite well. And I would like for you to talk about this preface. First, understand a little bit about the motivations of this world, what motivated her. It's great for us to think that Maria Firmina Reis wrote Ursula at a time when novels were consolidating in Brazil as a literary form. So she participated in this time, this inaugural time of the creation of novels in Brazil. What can a novel do as a literary form? Novels, we know, they were born at a time of a class which was seeking narrative, a class that had more future than past. But when the novel reached Brazil, it found a slave-holding colonial context. So what Firmina did was to give a more elastic form to this genre, this uterine genre, to create a world in the novel. And she does so enunciating a lost community, a fractured story. She had such a full awareness that she announced this in the preface, the prologue, not only when she said that even knowing that many people would laugh at her, others would simply be indifferent to her work. Even so, she gave birth to that novel. She did so opening the way for a Brazilian narrative tradition, strong tradition that exists, and it's elaborated by black women to this day. So Firmina consolidated and helped to consolidate the novelistic genre in Brazil with one of the most prestigious genres in Brazil, did so creating a community, a narrative for a people who were shorn of, dispossessed of the very conception of historical past. So Firmina, in her prologue, she announced this power, which she was also concerned, this didactic concern of explaining to people what she was doing. Firmina was a grand intellectual, a woman who was training, preparing people, forming new intellectuals. So it's necessary to say that that novel, beyond any characteristics, aesthetic characteristics, fundamental aesthetic characteristics, which can be acknowledged, it's important because it opened doors for other women who suddenly might have been more timid or shy or more difficulty in transcending this silence that prevented women's voices from being in the public space, reminding us that she is the genesis of the word woman, women's writing in Brazil, of every Brazilian woman. It's Firmina. She was the mother, an abolitionist writing, and she had a full awareness of her own time. So all of this, she all includes this in her preface, showing how aware she was of all this, how aware she was of all of those movements. And even so, she gave birth, even knowing everything, she gave birth to this novel. And here we are today, thanks to all these movements, celebrating this possibility. And she did clearly, okay, we could say that she was and is. Let's celebrate her presence here in the present tense. She's a mediatic woman, because She was very active in the press as well. She was active in the press of her time at the time, and the degree to which this was important for her own formative years, and these circles were so important for her as well. I believe that she was a mediatic. She was a media person, especially a media person, because she is, and continues to be a strategist. She's a strategist. It would be unthinkable for her to dispute the public debate, literary production, the abolitionist struggles in the 19th centuries without occupying the press. And this way of vying for space and affirming the authorship by a black woman writer, it's something that merits being read from a perspective, a historical perspective. Why? Because in fact, Maria Firmina Reis was a pioneer as we see her today, just as we see her, but having her experience connected to what we experience today, it's important for us to see how what was experienced by her in terms of calculations, expectations, and procedures was done by other women. In this sense, I think it's worthwhile to call Maria Firmina Reis a thread which we pull together with several other women writers. Fernanda, we should think of her as someone who calls attention to the literacy processes by her predecessors and opened the way for her, and what she generated to the point of guaranteeing and encouraging and legitimizing this occupation of the opening panel of Flip with women who mobilize the media in different ways, either some more easily than others, and others with more joviality, and sometimes with more affliction, but with the certainty that it is all about a necessary confrontation, even today. A confrontation, a necessary confrontation to denaturalize precisely this idea of our non-place. What Firmina did Firmina, in her work, she looks at black men and women in a very human way, of course. She sees their humanity. Unfortunately, she launched this humanity, and she also is a woman who suffers for that very reason, suffering also from not being treated as a woman who deserves respect. In some sense, we're talking a lot here about her prose, but her poetry and other writings of hers, we can we feel this pain and this frustration and this struggle, Fernanda? I think so. I think that it is part of her work, but I think that especially the message is that of a quest for freedom, a pursuit of freedom and possibility of existence, lives, reflecting on denials. I make the choice for a victorious narrative in the case of Maria Firmina Reis, because whenever we visit black women writers, we can look at them from this angle, but because it's a real angle. But there's another thing, a flame that touches us and warms us to this day, and in a sense it interferes in this scheme of solitude and loneliness. We dispossess this loneliness because there's a community now. We are a community now. We're here, strengthening a community which welcomes and embraces Maria Firmina Reis. So although there is this side of pain and suffering, I believe that the message of Maria Firmina dos Reis is one of life beyond all the process which attempt to undermine us and to scorn us. Nothing is going to prevent me. It's not the heroine. No, that's not like the cliche as a heroine. We're talking about a community affirmation. Firmina, from my point of view, is inclined towards establishing, through her narrative, a community. Is it a strategy? I think so. I think it is. After all, Firmina lived close to black people. Her mother was an enslaved woman who received her manumission, but Firmina herself showed us the weight of manumission, the historical sense of manumission. Firmina was a strategic woman, a strategist. There are several different spheres, but what behooves us now as readers of Firmina is to acknowledge this community which belongs to us, which gave us a worthy past. It's our past. It belongs to us. You just quoted and cited that she gave meaning and explained to us what this manumission was, and you nodded. I would like for you to compliment that. What meaning does she give to manumission, of her mother's manumission? I think it's important to call attention to this historical experience in her family. We know that people came from Africa, black people came from Africa to Brazil. It was a trauma, the Middle Passage, but slavery doesn't give life to our existence. The result of our actions, when I say ours in the collective sense and ancestral sense, Brazil came at the time that Maria Firmina Reis was born, with the country with the largest black free population of the Americas. Free black population. This means that in that context, at the early 1820s, when people discussed the projects and plans for independence of Brazil, which were it's being discussed now 200 years later. This year, Maria Firmina dos Reis' mother had already had a daughter, giving her as her main legacy freedom. And based on this place of freedom, Maria Firmina dos Reis projected other meanings for that. This elaboration serves as a gunpowder to explode with light that we're not used to seeing. A trail of gunpowder. What are these stories of freed black people that Brazil has ignored by ignoring the work of people like Maria Firmina dos Reis, Francisco de Paula Brito, Machado de Assis, black with all his complexity. These are people who were born in the late 18th and early 19th century as free black Brazilians. And it's hard for Brazilians to place them stepping on historical ground as we understand it. When Maria Firmina dos Reis promoted a kind of catalyst, she catalyzed the efforts of her previous generation. We need to pay close attention to that, because there is low expectation towards what kind of freed blacks can do in a country like Brazil. And a lot of people that we still ignore made huge leaps, quantum leaps, based on this condition of non-enslavement, something that repositions the debates concerning merit, talent, virtues, citizenship, etc., etc. Extremely well put, exactly. This writer, this woman, amazing. We don't have a single picture of her. We don't have a painting, a photograph, any picture. But the movement that is formed now is a movement of hope for us to be able to, based on Firmina as the guiding thread, to bring other black experiences at this time in literature as well. Do you believe that we will be able to get more information on Maria Firmina? Do we have any more information to find about her? I'm certain of that, although the story, it's an old story. Our steps have come from a long time before us. As Jerema Werneck says, it's a history that has a lot of future that's still going to happen. So I believe that there's still a lot to know about Firmina. But Firmina teaches us something as a priority, which I believe is the invitation of this festival, this flip and this tribute, which is the possibility of escaping a single narrative. As the Nigerian writer Chimamanda Adichie teaches us, Firmina does this in her novel. She creates in the form an escape from the single narrative, because we have two narratives happening here at the same time. So I believe that this is the main provocation and the invitation that Firmina makes, the possibility of escaping a single narrative, which still attempts to limit us as a people. And this is the future that Firmina leaves us with, which is right there in her work. I believe that the invitation is open to everyone, one and all. The search for other narratives, other possibilities, which also explain to us, which mean us as people, as Brazilian subjects and protagonists. And Firmina does this in her novel. So we have a long path that have traveled, and we have numerous paths to follow in the future, because what Firmina gives us as a possibility is a lot. It's a great deal. So I have this invitation, and I extend it to all of you. Try to find escape from a single narrative, which is celebrated by the literary canon and celebrated by more of the same. Take adventures. Go out on the limb. Firmina is calling on us to do so. Go out on the limb. We can't insist on this limiting, constraining narrative, which makes us an absence, which limits us. Firmina opens up. She expands, amplify. We are all here learning from her. We're all learning with Firmina. And we could, amongst so many other wishes, we could have Firmina in schools, right? Firmina, when we study Brazilian literature, have this novel as part of the reading list. The professors and teachers are sharing this literature with us. I believe that one of the experiences that I had with Maria Firmina dos Reis involves making her essential. In 2017, in the centennial of the death, the National Library in Brasilia created a project which identified the work in the black authors in the library as with the seal of Maria Firmina dos Reis. Based on an initiative like this, it's not about an individual gesture of teachers and professors who read this novel. Rather, read this novel because we believe and insist that it is an indispensable author. We need to promote her indispensability, that of Maria Firmina dos Reis. My mind, nobody can enslave my mind. That's what she tells us, basically. That's it. Nobody can enslave my mind. The 19th century novel, she tells us this. Nobody can enslave my mind. And echoes, nobody can enslave my mind. I would like to thank you all, two great researchers and Brazilian professors here with us. Fernanda Miranda and Flávia Magalhães Pinto, celebrating Maria Firmina dos Reis. Long live Maria Firmina. That's why we're here today. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I wish to say that our authors are going to be out in the town square to autograph their books. And wait for a minute because we have a wonderful closing activity here with this slam, this São Paulo slam group with a performance and an artistic manifestation on the work of Maria Firmina dos Reis. The slam consists of a flor descendente, name a flor descendente, Carolina Peixoto and Boelena and Juan Araújo. The slam group from São Paulo, thinking, creating, and inspired by Maria Firmina. And see you in just a few minutes.
Amaldiçoo, amaldiçoo, amaldiçoo.
I curse, 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 I curse. I curse. I curse the first man who enslaved his brother or neighbor. I know that this novel is worth little. It's written by a woman, and a Brazilian woman with a little education and without the who counsel her to discuss and correct with little education, talking about the language of her parents and little with little reading. Her intellectual is almost nil. Maria Firmina dos Reis, from Maranhão, a Pisces, a daughter of unwed mother. She became an orphan at 5 years of age. As 16 million Brazilians, And because of that, she was raised by an aunt who gave her access to literature and reading from an early age, which is unthinkable for black children born in the 19th century. We have become loved, re-loved. Since the time of the big house in the bed, they always had their mixed breed. My light skin gave me the right to access fermented bread with tears, educated to serve the slaveholder, but the black blood dripping on the blood, the darker, more blood drips on the darker the skin, the more blood drips on the floor. The darker the skin, the more blood drips to the floor. The darker, the more blood drips to the floor. And they continue criminalizing our acts, ridiculing our traits. The cheapest flesh in the market, cheapest flesh in the market. We know the low price paid by the state, making the death penalty in the hands of the uniformed military, but it's cheaper, but they don't. I could be the next one, the cheapest, not even holiday in the military police. It wouldn't be paid, and they continue to criminalize our acts. They ridicule our dreads. Everything has become, but it's step backing. Our ancestors were waiting for every whipping, for every disfigured body, for every 111 shots against they shot our people. This pain, which dilacerates our soul, xenophobia, this pain, which hurts the most in our lives. Xenophobia, that's the pain which martyrizes us and kills, which steals our beliefs, our rest and calm. You can feel and express feelings, slaveholding feelings in the present century, in the 19th century and 21st century. Religious morality, civic morality, raise up and speak out loud, crushing and poisoning the family in their sanctuary, in demoralizing and despising the entire nation. Enslaved persons are viewed as victims, and they are. Slaves are seen by everyone as victims, and they are. Slaves are seen by everyone. Slaves are seen by everyone as victims, and they are. She graduated as a teacher. She was the first black teacher to teach in Guimarães, in the public school in Guimarães, and she created the first mixed co-ed school in the state, boys and girls. From her pen will be a simple instrument transcending words, and Maria Firmina sowing other paths, opening up spaces in the social void in time and transcending, crossing centuries, women, beginnings, histories, writing ties. Maranhão, a novelist, musician, a black woman with her hands prepared for writing. 1859, Ursula, the first novel, amongst others, of these so many novels, silenced and erased, effaced. What's the legacy of a country which does not tell its own history, which sweeps under the rugs, memories, stories I talked about before, but little has changed. Today, we still try to find the ears, the wages, the political positions, the work, the handicrafts, the craft of writing, which makes people shine as they read, but they don't pay for a poem. We'll find everyone that you left behind producing art, looking at the most varied details. And we sing at the seaside today's joy, in addition to listing Maria Firmina, demarcating literary terrains, building castles of words, and changing the laws. Freedom, freedom, oh poet, sing. And freedom, oh freedom, poet, sing. And freedom, oh poet, sing. And to freedom, oh poet, sing. What would the world be in darkness without the letters would not have life? In the grass, taking freedom and glory, her name one day will live in history. It's not wanting, it's a desire. These are my wishes. I want this more than anything else. What else can I want? Carolina, Lélia, Maurinense, poet, and freedom, oh poet, sing. She, when she's beautiful, this damsel who I've paid tribute to with my heart and dedicated my soul, my chest in the ecstasy of love, I live as a subject to her. Her name? No. My lips will not tell. She, my star, alive and beautiful, mitigating my suffering, my affliction, turning my weeping into a smile. Her name, my lips will not say. She, a beautiful virgin, so simple, like the angels of God. She, oh no. You will never know on anyone's land from my lips the name that she has. And this name, my lips will not say. Love is swift enjoyment, like a childish smile, this sweet, and destroys life. It's delirium, delusion. I loved you, my lie, how sad. Breathing now, this loneliness, you know quite well. Rich flowers singing, even in love, from my tender heart. My love was pure. It was not a mistake. It was not affectation. If you don't capture her, forget, because I am proud. True love. We may never know, Firmina. We do have a date from the first woman who went mad for a failed love, or for a requited love that destroyed everything. Who was the first person who thought that love was not for oneself? Love that we know is an invention, their invention of those who hold the truths in their books, who created possession, jealousy, slavery, poverty, and feminicide. Femicide in 18, Maria Firmina feared to say who she loved in 2017. I was also afraid, but we write about relations, lines, invisible lines, which were passed on with whispers, and you could only hear them if you're from the valley, who love too much and build a new kind of love, of those who make flowers bloom, giving more, saying morning to everyone, good morning to everyone, one and all, who make us notice the colors on the streets. When I was breathed relief, a sigh of relief, the color of my dear Firmina, or my belly, this love that my dear Firmina, it's Shioma Niarai, my jeans, it's low, it's vulgar, it's fat, utopia. It's a world where we are all loved by ourselves. My loves are from the earth, but they look like they're from heaven. They're like the morning star or the moon with no veil. They're enchantment, long away harmonies, smiling amongst weeping happiness of flower from the dew kissed from the morning sun and the timid and pure expression of the sweet innocent love. My love is the simple flower raising up timid like a gazelle and ardent like a volcano. The candor of purity, beautiful flowers who enjoyed more in life, such loves. I have loves on earth which are similar to love in heaven, in the soul, and I covered them with a dense veil because this love is so beautiful that there was never another one like it, hidden from everyone, fearing a rival. Only my soul trusts, as my pain trusts, the temple and the sanctuary of my eternal loves. Maria, how are you? I hope that you're still there. Here, down here, we're still trying to eliminate necropolitics, and you know quite well what this fight is all about against necropolitics, but I don't want to talk about that now. I want to talk about your writing and the dopamine that they gave me until they became my new habit. I would like to sit on the sidewalk in front of my house with you and hear your stories and experience while you tickle my head, like I learned in the old black women. We kneel and sit next to the old black women to hear their stories. And this act of kneeling while the older woman is speaking, my dear, is an act of gratitude and respect. That's true. Gratitude and respect. And gratitude to show me that as a poet, as poets, we're able to be plural. And we have the right to write about whatever we want, not only about the topics, conditioning factors, or conditional factors, in addition to our wounds and hurts and our drums beat with our hearts and our chest, building beautiful lives with melodies and gratitude, with the poet Elena showing me that women who love too much are, and that's not a problem. Gratitude to make me understand that black women and transvestites feel their life with their skin turns inside out, and we're left on the margins and the fringes. We're not the fringes, we're the pillars who hold the center up. And gratitude to make me understand that racism doesn't define me. And for you to be a black woman from a runaway slave haven who loves too much and is too femina for a society which 2 centuries later hasn't learned to love, much less to be anti-racist. Gratitude to you, my dear Firmina. You are Brazilian. You are Brazilian. You're prodigious, showing great Europe that we have prestige. Rise up. Don't fear your rivals. If you're not the first, to the first you'll be equal. And if you don't have the reward that you deserve, proceed triumphant elsewhere. Go out, provoke contradictions. You don't have a crown or Camões or Bocage. If a quote could come from my chest, a quote, a mysterious quote or phrase, like a sigh in a long night. Oh, if I could, if only I could, but I'm mute. What kind of law this phrase expresses and summarizes? I went to school, college, university courses, and serenades and literary festivals without ever hearing of Maria Firmina Reis. I think what kind of revolution would this have been if I had known that almost 200 years ago, a black woman, free, educated woman, was the first Brazilian woman to write a novel in Portuguese, which was not from Europe or against the historical contextualization, which takes naturally the idea of men enslaving his equals, a pioneer, too black to have prestige, accessing several different spaces, but did not sit in the chair of the immortal lettered men. She was born poor with no acknowledgement or recognition for her, with her image forgotten in time. The valuation of great writers has come through reading, through access to their work, to spaces. We have a voice. You can no longer admit what happened with Maria Firmina, Estrada do Patrocínio, Carolina, Maria Dura Pilar, and so many others. The recognition needs to reach them in life before the tribute. Thank you, everyone. We are Slam das Minas from São Paulo, and this is a poetic presentation directed by Luis Ribeiro, with authorial text, and Maria Firmina Reis. I'm Pan Araújo, Carolina Peixoto, Ibu Helena, Afrodescendente, APH. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Buy our books. We're outside with our books on sale. Now, we're going to have a serenade at the Poetry Card on Pontal Beach.